So, let's talk about 2019. Specifically, let's talk about the fact that it is now over and behind us, and we have an entire year's worth of movies to review and rank. 2019 gave us a lot to sift through and discuss, from remakes, to revamps, to adaptations, to the ever-abounding superhero movies, Christmas cults, jungle-themed video games, dancing clowns, shape-shifting clowns, Elton John, Baby Yodas, and cats. And a record-setting year in box office numbers. 2020 is looking to be an equally great year in movies, but before we dive headfirst into what's coming, and also before the rose-tinted lens of hindsight sets in on what's past, let's take a critical look at what 2019 gave us. We are Cinema Brawls, also known as the embodiment of the feeling you get when you have to pee in a dream and then pee in real life. We are here to rank and discuss the top 5 best and 5 worst movies of 2019.
We've got an honorable mention for our worst movie, which was not quite bad enough to make it on to the worst movies list, but good enough to get talked about. That was Dark Phoenix, the X-Men movie. Honestly, kind of a disappointment as far as X-Men movies go, but that's really all I'm going to say about that one.
And moving on up to our honorable mention for the best, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Quentin Tarantino is a fantastic director that has decided he's only going to grace us with 10 films for some reason, and this is number 9? All of his films are a masterclass at brilliant writing and pulling off mind-blowing twists, and this movie is no exception. Based on true events, it doubles down on the 60s nostalgia and the way Hollywood used to run, and knocks it out of the park with its great character interactions. I'll be honest, a script like this in anyone else's hands would have never taken off like it did here. The last 45 minutes or so are a roller coaster ride of pure Tarantino magic that might not be for everyone, but deserves this spot on our list. Now that the honorable mentions are out of the way, let's get into the real list. Starting with number 5 of the worst and alternating between bad and good, our number 5 worst movie is the new Hellboy remake. The special effects on the monsters are really good, definitely an upgrade from the Guillermo del Toro films, and David Harbour does a pretty good job in the lead role. The problem is that it was a movie that no one was expecting or really asked for. The story was kind of lacking and was sacrificed in favor of bombastic action scenes and a bunch of silly one-liners. It was just a little boring, and the budget should have gone into making a third Guillermo del Toro movie. It has been said that it's closer to the actual comic books it's based on, but here's the thing. The comic book medium is completely different from a film medium, and it just doesn't translate well in a way that a lot of fans really like.
John Wick is one of my favorite franchises. It's so beautifully violent that it's impossible not to be impressed at the sheer ballsiness of it all. No, the third movie in the franchise isn't their best, but it does have Keanu Reeves fighting the guys from the raid in a glass room, and fighting on motorcycles with swords, and killing people with a horse. It's a good movie. You should go see it. Next on our list, Ma. Very, very few movies disappointed me quite like Ma. Ma had a lot of things going for it, or so I'm told, but if they did, I don't know what they were. The commercial looked okay, I guess, and it was rated R, which usually means that it has some crazy ideas, but this was one of the most boring movies I've seen all year. It has absolutely no imagination whatsoever, and I've officially put more thought into this paragraph describing it than anyone put into the plot of this stupid movie.
Our number 4 best movie is Pokemon Detective Pikachu. I've heard it described by other people like, oh yeah, it was pretty good, you know, if you like Pokemon. But that, my friends, is a huge understatement. This was exactly the kind of movie fans of the series were waiting for. The Pokemon look great, they're exactly what they need to look like to be realistic, but not too weird. You might say it was a natural evolution. Now yes, it is a Pokemon movie, and if you're really not into the franchise, I don't blame you if you never saw it, and it's based on kind of an obscure game within the franchise itself, but it had an interesting story with some good action and great humor, and Ryan Reynolds steals the show. definitely worth at least one viewing and worthy of our number 4 spot. Let's move on to our number 3 worst movie, Cats. Here's the thing with Cats. The story in this musical has been controversial to say the least ever since it first came out back in the 80s. It's always been a little weird, a little uncomfortable, and has received a lot of hate. I didn't know this, but apparently the musical is based on a set of poems written by T.S. Eliot back in 1939, and even then, it was a little weird. So I think it's no coincidence that the movie just escalates the awkwardness and the silliness and the uncomfortable feelings. It's right in keeping with what the original source material, the musical, was kind of going for in a sense. I think in no way is that truer than combining grade A actors like Ian McKellen, Judi Dench, and mixing them with people like Jason Derulo and Taylor Swift. See, it's supposed to look weird, and it's supposed to kind of get your attention like that. And I think it's significant that a movie like this, that inherently offends people and pushes the envelope as far as what we're willing to accept visually, would come out in a year like 2019. It's almost a perfect fit for the different social changes that are occurring in real life. Now, with all of that being said, it's still bad. The fact that it's intentionally offensive and awkward doesn't change the fact that it's offensive and awkward. It looks bad, the performances are kind of stiff, and it's a musical, and if that's not your thing, then it's not your thing. Its only saving grace is that some of the music is kind of catchy.
Ready or Not. Ready or Not was so much better than it had any right to be. The smart screenplay kept me engaged the whole time, and I watched this movie the same night that I saw Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. So, you know how good it is. The characters were interesting and relatable, and the premise was originally cliche, if that's a good way of putting it. It leaned harder into the humor than I thought it would, and overall, it's a great movie that I plan on seeing many, many more times. Next is Serenity. Unlike some other movies from this year, Serenity surprised me. And no, that's not a good thing. No movie caught me off guard quite like Serenity. The plot waffles somewhere between dumb and somewhat maybe a little bit kind of interestingly dumb, but usually it's just too busy smelling its own farts to be taken seriously. Overall, it would be forgettable if it didn't trip over the Olympic high dive into a pile of tuna vomit and then stand on the podium expecting everyone's applause.
Now, our number 2 best movie was Knives Out. Knives Out came out really recently towards the end, but for what it was pretty spectacular. Really enjoyed it a lot, actually. And the reason being for that was you had a murder mystery type movie, but it had a lot of great comedy to it. As you know, we're all fans of comedies here on the channel. But this one was, subtle enough and intermingled with suspense and mystery in a way that really hadn't been done before. From about a third of the way into the movie, spoilers, if that hasn't been mentioned already, you kind of know what happened and how the man was murdered, but you don't know the full story. And it just kind of takes you on this fun adventure, exploring the dynamics of this family. It did really well. It was fun to watch and deserves to be one of the best movies of the year, especially with all the great characters. You had Chris Evans, Daniel Craig, so many other great actors who just did a wonderful performance while filming. Now, the absolute worst movie of the year goes to La Llorona, which was a horror flick about a ghost lady who tries to drown children. Honestly, the reason this came out to be the worst movie of 2019 was due to a lot of different factors, but the biggest one, without a doubt, was it felt very lazy. The writing in it was nothing original. It was just a generic horror movie. Actually takes part in the Conjuring universe, which followed the formula, but it almost felt as if it was somebody had written out a horror Mad Libs. when your horror movie ends with a ghost being stabbed, like, I don't care if you even try to explain, like, that doesn't make any sense. That's just lazy writing. Oh yeah, let's stab the ghost. None of it was even really that scary, honestly. For a horror movie to not be scary, that's a problem. And that's why La Llorona is going as our worst movie for 2019. Switching things back over to the best movie of 2019, without a doubt, had to be Avengers Endgame. Now, that seems like an obvious choice, but when you think of the culmination of the movies that came before it, it did such an amazing job of not only pleasing the fans, but coming to a wonderful conclusion. Not to mention, became the most highest grossing movie of all time. So, you know, kudos to them. But those are our lists. Those are our top and bottom movies of the last year. And if you have any disagreements, leave something in the comments, let us know. But that's really how the 2019 year went. It had a lot of duds, but it had a lot of good ones too. And I think we can appreciate the year as a whole for movies, hoping that, we can look forward to something better or, just as good in the next decade. And that's us here at Cinema Brawls. Bye.